Okay, well, we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to get started as everyone else continues to file into our virtual room here. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting RFSI webinar. We're super happy about this one because it brings us back to a topic we started exploring as a company back in 2021, the intersection of regenerative agriculture and human health. Back then, as the world was coming out of lockdown post-COVID, we held an online gathering called Rooted in Health, a multi-day event that explored the science, the policy, the innovation, and the investment opportunity at this critical nexus. Since that event in 2021, and especially in the past 12 months, we have seen immense growth in the food as medicine movement, as well as an incredible community of organizations and companies working and investing in the space. And while RFSI has continued to talk about regenerative agriculture and human health and nutrition at our broader conferences, today marks our first dedicated program on this topic since 2021. So we're thrilled to dig into the topic and to have you here to do that with us today with our fabulous speakers. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about who RFSI is for those of you who may not know us yet. In 2019, I founded RFSI, or Regenerative Food Systems Investments, out of a recognized need to shift some of the massive amounts of capital that flows to conventional and extractive agriculture and food systems towards systems that repair, restore, and regenerate, not just the soil, but farmer livelihoods, communities, and yes, human health and nutrition. Our focus is on capital because we see it as not the only, but a crucial lever to unlock transformation. Our method of serving this mission of shifting awareness and capital towards systems transformation is through education and convenings. You can learn from us through our weekly newsletter, RFSI News, through free webinars like this one, and through our annual events. Most notably, our largest event is the RFSI Forum and will take place October 7th and 8th in Minneapolis, our first time in the Midwest, so we're pretty excited. The forum is in its 7th year and is much more than a conference. And yes, I realize I bring bias to that comment. It's the gathering place to learn from and engage with those who are leading the way in funding and investing in resilient agriculture and food. This year, the forum will kick off with an afternoon pre-event workshop on October 6th for farmers and founders to learn about the capital ecosystem that exists for regenerative and to kick off their fundraising and financing journey equipped with the tools that they need to do so effectively. On October 7th and 8th, 500 investors, founders, innovators, farmers, and system builders will gather for deeply strategic learning, solution building, and relationship building. During these 2 days, attendees will learn through case studies, panel discussions, and workshops, as well as through all the great connections that we all know happen in the hallways, during lunches, and at the networking breaks and receptions. This year's event will also feature a pitch session hosted by the First 30 and centered on a theme very relevant to today's program: agriculture and health, solving global health challenges with agriculture and food interventions. We're seeking companies that recognize agriculture not just as food production, but as a scalable health delivery system with significant economic potential. These companies might be working on solutions on-farm health enhancement or maybe post-farm gate health value capture. If you'd like to learn more, or you would like to apply, or you think you might know of some startups that should apply, check out the details on our website. My colleague Bjorn will post some information in the chat, or you can use the QR code on the screen. We hope to see you in Minneapolis in October, but if you're overseas and the trip is just a little bit too far for that time of year, we'll also host our 3rd annual RFSI Europe event on March 4th and 5th, 2026 in Brussels. You won't want to miss this opportunity to engage and learn with the European ag investment community. Okay, I know that was a lot, and that's enough about us now. It's time now to get into our main program. Today, we are lucky to have with us 2 individuals doing very different work towards a similar goal: a healthier agriculture and food system built on greater awareness and understanding about the connection between how we grow food and human health and nutrition outcomes. Mary Purdy is an integrative eco-dietitian working at the intersection of sustainable food systems, climate, and human health. She spent over 13 years in clinical practice using a personalized and food as medicine approach and taught for 8 years at Bastyr University in Seattle, Washington. Currently, she is managing director of the Nutrient Density Alliance, which works to connect the dots between soil health and nutrient-rich food. She is also adjunct faculty at the Culinary Institute of America's Master's Program in Sustainable Food Systems. Naeem Lakhani is managing partner and founding partner at venture fund The First 30. He is a tech founder and former chief data officer with a track record in AI, computational biology, and large-scale digital platforms. He brings knowledge in technology strategy and product diligence and is part of the team at TFT that has built what they call the agri-health framework for investing, something we'll learn about later in the program. Today, we will hear first from Mary, who will provide a framing of the current landscape and understanding for the ag food health nexus. And if we have time, we'll answer some audience questions. Following Mary's presentation, Naeem will share about his and TFT's journey to the agri-health framework I just mentioned that they recently launched. Then he and I will sit down for a few questions and we will open it back up to you for your questions. So without further delay, I'm quite happy to pass the virtual floor over to Mary. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's such a delight to be here. As Sarah mentioned, I'm the managing director of the Nutrient Density Alliance, and we are building the case for the nutritional advantages and the increased nutrient density of foods that have been grown and or raised regeneratively. So you might ask, well, what the heck are nutrient-dense foods anyway? Well, I'm here to tell you. The framework that we look at is foods that are rich in those nutrients, like your fiber, your vitamins, your minerals, and your phytonutrients that we know in the literature support and optimize the physiological functions of your body, including the old human gut microbiome, and foods that are free from those ingredients and compounds that we have known to be demonstrating less optimal impact to health, including those agrochemicals and formulations of food-derived substances and additives that are industrial processed. Those are otherwise known as ultra-processed foods. And what we also know is that these nutritional qualities are strongly influenced and determined by how food is grown and the agricultural practices that are used in its production. So I want to kick it off by asking you a couple of questions and just getting your brain to think a little bit outside the box. Number one, what holds meaning for you? Number two, why do you invest? And number three, what, when you think about it, was your most successful investment and why was that? And ultimately, I think that means, how do you define what ROI means to you? So I think we can all safely say that we all believe that everybody deserves access to be healthy and to have healthy, nurturing food that supports our well-being, the welfare of animals, our communities, our farmers, and our environment. However, we are in a time of environmental crisis, of climate crisis, of health crisis, because humans have done a lot more taking and perhaps not enough giving. So if we think about our global food and agricultural system, and many of you may know this, it's responsible for 1/3 of our greenhouse gases, for a huge amount of deforestation, eutrophication from fertilizer runoff, and that leads to dead zones in important bodies of water, 50% of land use. It is the leading cause of soil erosion, water contamination, biodiversity loss, all of which have health implications. It is a major source of air pollution, in part by industrial animal agriculture. It is responsible for a huge loss of habitat for both wildlife and people. And ultimately, it produces a large, abundant amount of cheap, ultra-processed foods, which are contributing to many chronic diseases. And all of this has human health impacts, and very often this disproportionately affects marginalized communities, communities of color, indigenous communities. So if you're a statistics person, we've got some stats on the slide for you. If you're a visual person, I want you to imagine yourself on a plane, perhaps your last trip, and 150 people are on that plane. 75 of those people have prediabetes or diabetes. If there's 15 teenagers on that plane, 5 of them have prediabetes. Only about 10 to 15 people on that plane with you are metabolically healthy. 50 have a risk for cancer. 100 are overweight, according to BMI. And poor nutrition overall is responsible for 11,000 deaths weekly. And I have to tell you, I just had to update this slide because so much of this information has gotten worse over the past year. Half of those deaths are related to cardiometabolic issues. And in fact, the number of deaths from heart disease worldwide has quadrupled from 2 million in 2000 to 9 million in 2019. This is preventable stuff. And BIPOC populations, that's Black, Indigenous, people of color, tend to be disproportionately affected. Now, there's some things that come into play here. About 60% of the calories that we consume are from ultra-processed foods. A huge portion of our protein comes from animal sources, and most of that is conventionally raised and is often less high quality. Additionally, we are using 1 billion pounds of pesticides in the United States every single year, and the use of fertilizer to grow crops has increased by 800% since the 1960s. So a lot of big changes here. So what's the impact of those agrochemicals? Well, when we think about the excessive use of fertilizer, it actually has a huge impact on the soil, on the microbial population, on the plant, on the phytochemical production of that plant. The runoff can contaminate groundwater, which we know has negative impacts on people's thyroid health. When we think about excessive pesticide use, again, reducing that soil microbial diversity in the land. And when we have looked at the literature, a lot of exposure to pesticide has been linked to endocrine disruption, cardiovascular issues, neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, as well as things like diabetes, birth defects, respiratory illness, cancers, and asthma. Ooh, that's a lot. Additionally, when we use a lot of pesticides, that inhibits the synthesis of the plant's production of phytochemicals, which I'll talk a bit more about. The thing to really emphasize here, this ain't about necessarily poor food choices. We're not putting the burden on the consumer, but we really need to take a look at these dominating systems that are powered by large agribusinesses and multinational food corporations that are definitively playing a role in this. We know that food access and nutrition access is hugely important in this discussion. 47 million people in the United States, including 14 million children, are food insecure or nutrition insecure. Perhaps they have access to food, but it ain't nutritious. We're seeing that Black and Latinx families are 2.5 and 2 times higher to have these issues. This is not necessarily about a shortage of food. There are deeper rooted issues here, poverty, racism, policy, or a lack of policy that play a very big role here. And we need to really think about how we are addressing or not addressing those underlying issues. According to the USDA, millions of people are living in food deserts, or food apartheids, they're often called. Zip codes are often determining how well people wind up living their lives from a health perspective. There's fewer supermarkets, there's more convenience stores in BIPOC communities. Very often these are foods that are high in fat, sugar, and alcohol, which we know are contributing to some of those chronic diseases, and it may be the only thing they have access to. So let's talk about costs. What is the cost of all of these issues? Well, the combined healthcare spending and the lost productivity from these suboptimal diets are costing our economy $1.1 trillion a year. For every dollar that we spend on food, the economy is losing $1 in health harms. That is not a productive way to spend our money. And we have hidden environmental and health and economic costs of our food system, which are estimated at $12 trillion a year and only expected to rise to $16 trillion a year by 2050. And I'm sure many of you have heard this term, which is, what is the true cost of food? So you might spend a dollar on a hot dog, but ultimately that translates to a much greater cost. As a country, we spend $1.1 trillion on food. But there are impacts to many other parts of our society, healthcare, climate change, biodiversity that come from that food and agricultural system. So when we think about the true cost of food, that hot dog that I talked about being a dollar, actually it's 3 times as much as that because of the issues associated with healthcare, climate, and biodiversity loss. So true cost of food is closer to $3.2 trillion a year. That's a lot of money. However, The thing that's really important for us to know is that Americans currently, and of course many people globally, are simply not even meeting their nutritional needs. They're not even meeting the estimated average requirements, the bare minimum for numerous nutrients, vitamins and minerals, healthy fats, fiber, polyphenols. 90% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. That means probably about 90 people on this call are deficient in vitamin D. And if you don't know, ask your doctor to get tested and see what you can do about it. So food as medicine is truly a pathway, and I want to talk a little bit about the evidence thus far. If you're not familiar with it already, which I think you are, these programs are integrating food-based nutritional interventions into our healthcare system as a way to treat or prevent disease and also advance health equity. This is a program that might prescribe medically tailored meals, prescribe groceries or produce prescriptions. And the goal is to support disease management and also optimize well-being. And specifically, this can be based on the presence of some kind of a health condition as well as a social need. Very often, dietitians are leveraged, and hopefully, culturally appropriate culinary education is also offered to patients. Right now, since 2010, there have been over 1,000 of these programs that have been launched and funded by major organizations like the Rockefeller Foundation, Gus Schumacher, and Novo Nordisk. What kind of savings are being talked about? Well, the Tufts University, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation, have intimated that $13.6 billion could be saved annually with these food as medicine programs. When we provide these medically tailored meals and the groceries to people, it could avoid 6 million hospitalizations annually. $185 billion could be saved over a decade. And these produce prescriptions for people who have diabetes could actually avert almost 300,000 cardiovascular events. That's incredible. Those are incredible numbers. Now, that is what has been purported, right? But what has actually been done? I want to showcase a couple of food as medicine program results. And, the insurance industry right now is really in a very interesting contraction moment. So I wanted to highlight two types of programs that are out there that have seen great success. This was Blue Cross in North Carolina, and they had a program for members with type 2 diabetes. They had 6 months of personalized health coaching, twice monthly food box delivery for those patients who had type 2 diabetes. In terms of the improvements, they saw improved BMI numbers, improved average physical health, improved mental health, and their food insecurity dropped by half. In terms of cost savings, there was a reduction of $139 per member per month, which is a total cost, medical cost of $10 per member per month for partial participation. And when this is extrapolated to an entirety of all those potential members, there could be a health savings cost of $8.5 to $13.1 million annually. That's huge. We also looked at Mass Health and had nutrition services. These are nutrition services that are medically tailored meals, home delivered meals, produce prescriptions, among other services. And those results were reduced hospitalizations by 23%, reduced emergency department visits by 13%, and the cost savings. Participants spent over $2,500 less in healthcare costs. So these, again, are really significant numbers that I think we need to be paying attention to. A lot of academic institutions are on board. These are just some of the studies that are out there, the papers. Food is medicine. The time is now. Yes, it is. Actually, it was about 25 years ago, but it is now as well. We're seeing this nexus being taught at medical schools, including more food in curriculum, making sure that we really value it. Sustainable diets, harmonizing the health of individuals, bringing in the healthcare sector to really understand sustainability from a health perspective. And truly, the most important thing that I think we need to know here too is that our food system has produced and is producing food that is less nutritious than it was 50 to 70 years ago. We're seeing declines in our food in numerous very important vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, which are those antioxidant-rich compounds in plants. And yes, this is important too, flavor, which very often is denoting the presence of those important compounds. And why is this? Well, Very often, we can point to the soil because soil is the foundation of nutrition. Food begins in the soil, and if we don't have soil that is healthy and nutritious and nourishing, the food that is growing in it is not going to be as healthy and nourishing. We see microbes playing a really big role that will factor into another conversation I'll have shortly. And these practices that are currently conventional, using a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, have deeply eroded the health of the soil. So why does this matter? Because everything that's happening in our bodies is relying on nutrition. It is the foundation for our health. So every chemical reaction happening in your body right now, your neurotransmitter production, your liver producing enzymes to detoxify carcinogens, anti-inflammatory compounds from your immune system, that is all driven by nutrients that come from food. So our body is functioning in accordance to the amount of nutrients that we are able to provide to our body. So we often say, well, we are what we eat. Well, I would say kind of. We often say food is medicine. And I would say food should be medicine. Food should be health, but isn't always. Because a tomato is not a tomato, is not a tomato. It depends on how that food is grown and produced that is ultimately making the difference. So I propose, what if food is, or food as medicine, started dating regenerative agriculture? I see a very happy marriage. And I think that investing in food as medicine can actually help to drive the demand for regenerative agriculture. And we know there are benefits of this kind of regenerative farming on the nutritional value of food. We've seen gobs of research. I've been following this for about 6 or 7 years. Higher micronutrient levels, phytochemicals, which are so key for our health status, improved carbohydrate composition, better amounts of fiber. When we see a greater diversity of microbiota, that actually is very important for our human gut microbiome as well. And we're seeing that more so in regenerative crops than we are in conventionally grown crops. Lower levels of heavy metals, less exposure to chemicals. And we know that increased organic or regenerative intake of food is associated with a reduced incidence of infertility, birth defects, metabolic syndrome, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and so much more. And I always love to point out, very often, these regeneratively grown foods, these organic and grown foods, have more flavor. We're seeing this continue to track in the research of what's out there. This is a fantastic paper if you have not looked at it, Integrating Food as Medicine and Regenerative Agriculture for Planetary Health. All kinds of opportunities and directions of how we can integrate these two incredibly important movements. I also think it's important for us to recognize the limitations of current food as medicine and food as medicine models. It is not just about treating illness. It is about increasing access to healthy food. And in fact, the original intent of food as medicine was to invest and scale up those small and medium-sized local producers and farmers and to support them. Currently, in a lot of these models, there is a lack of community integration in the planning, the implementation, and the evaluation of these food as medicine programs. And very often, the organizations that are involved, that are providing the food, are really large, and they're doing the A-OK, Instacart, Feeding America, as opposed to some of the smallholder farmers that would be great to support in this. So I ask you the question, Sarah asked up front, or talked up front about capital. How do we shift capital to communities so that we can provide them instead of large institutions and agribusinesses or large corporations with agency? So food as medicine, could it be even better? Could these programs offer even greater amounts of benefit? What if food as medicine programs could support local economies? What if they could support regenerative practices that also serve the environment? What if they could offer foods that were even higher in nutrition and lower in chemicals? What if they supported overall resilience? So I ask you, what does it look like to invest in building a regenerative culture, to see a paradigm shift of what it means to truly invest in something where your ROI is people, health, and planet? I want to give you some examples of just a few, and then I will wrap up. But Recipe for Health is a wonderful organization that has a food as medicine program that sources from regenerative BIPOC-led farms. Foodshed is a farmer-owned cooperative that scales regenerative agriculture, working with healthcare partnerships. And I'll end by saying that Fresh RX Oklahoma, which is run by Aaron Martin. I highly recommend taking a look at this. They are providing produce prescriptions from local and regenerative farms for folks who are working with diabetes. They are also a member of the Nutrient Density Alliance. And they've been very instrumental with helping to pass a bill in Oklahoma called the Food is Medicine Act that has already passed the state house and will hopefully make a big difference in the lives of many. And I love this quote from one of the Fresh X farmers: when we have healthy soil, we create healthy plants, fruits, and vegetables to create a healthy environment, healthy humans, a healthy world, and a healthy community all together. I was recently made aware of this organization, which talks about how a new economic model is necessary, one that ensures the well-being of all people and allows organizations to thrive without transgressing the safe boundaries of the Earth's natural system. And we don't have much time. So I want to let you know that you have the power to help to create this change, to help to bring about a regenerative food system that ultimately helps to regenerate our health and the health of our planet. Thank you so much. I'll take a couple questions and then I will have to hop off.
Thank you so much, Mary. So much information, and we will share the recording with everyone. So let's go to two quick questions at least. The first one is that you shared some health insurance companies funding food as medicine programs. Are there any states that you know of that are implementing food as medicine through Medicaid programs?
Wow, I would have to take a look at the research. I imagine there is, with all the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare right now. I'm curious whether those food as medicine programs are continuing, but I would absolutely imagine that there are programs out there like that for sure.
Great. Next question. Is there a proven link between flavor and nutrient density?
I mean, proven is a tough word. I would say there are strong, strong links. I mean, the whole idea about why plants produce those phytochemicals, they are creating what's called organoleptic properties, which is the aroma and the sensory and the flavor of food, and that is directly linked to the plant's production of those phytochemicals. And obviously, if we have more phytochemicals in the food that offers flavor, that is an associated nutrient density benefit.
Awesome. I'm going to squeeze one more in here with 1 minute. Do you know if there's anything that tells us how the nutrient profile of foods grown hydroponically compared to those in healthy soils?
I do know. I actually have research on that. In some cases, I actually just had a student do a wonderful capstone on ginger, which actually showed a similar amount of nutrients in the ginger that was produced hydroponically. However, we don't know all of those phytochemicals that are produced by these foods. So there are a lot of perhaps phytochemicals that are not being produced in the same amounts, but we just don't know enough about that, the dark matter of food, as they say. So I would say, if it doesn't come from the soil, it's less likely to be as nutrient rich, but that may not hold true for every single food or every single crop.
Wow. Thank you so much. So much information shared here today. And if it wasn't already obvious, there's a lot that's been done, but there's still so much more research that we need to uncover in this space. So thank you for the work that you do, Mary.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. And I encourage people to reach out to me if they'd like. Thanks.
Awesome. And we will share that information with you and the recording, everybody. Thanks, Mary. Okay, fascinating work and perspective. We're going to shift gears now and introduce our next speaker to bring some investment context to this conversation, as Mary keyed up very nicely. As a reminder, Naeem is managing and founding partner at the First 30 venture firm that has just launched an agri-health framework for investing. I'm excited to learn more along with you guys and then dig into a conversation with him about investing in this space. So please welcome Naeem.
Hi, okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, right. Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure. That was amazing information from Mary. So eloquently put, lots of dense content in there. And I think the real key maybe takeaway for me, and part of why and how we've ended up where we've ended up, is food as medicine is a pathway. And I'll speak a little bit about our journey as TFT in building our agri-health strategy, which is revaluing agriculture as healthcare. Like Sarah mentioned, the context is from an investor context. So why is it actually valuable? And how did we end up here? A little bit about TFT, just briefly. I mean, we're an early stage venture investor in agricultural technologies that create measurable improvement in human health. We do think that agri-health is a new category that everybody should be thinking about. And is obviously putting together two massively large industries in their own right. But they both have pressures that are affecting them as well. Healthcare is actually sick care, as we know. It's not delivering health. If we think about the last 10 years of spend, it's about $100 trillion have been invested in the healthcare industry. And we are seeing marginal, if any, gains in terms of our lifespan, and similar with health span. So what is that 100 trillion really doing for us? It seems to be really misallocated capital. Ag, of course, delivering calories, but not nutritious calories. And in many cases, as Maria also alluded to, delivering toxicity to people. So there's tremendous pressure in these industries, and it is coming to head. There's a convergence in a lot of different ways, and we think that will create what we could call a new category of agri-health. So what I wanted to do is take you guys through a little of our journey and where I started trying to compress, maybe a little over half a decade into 10 minutes. But how we ended up with health as kind of the core investable thesis for regenerative agriculture and agriculture in general. So many of you have probably come across this problem set, and this is the problem set I rocked up to when I went into the space. I'm a tech entrepreneur, didn't know much about the space, wanted to get into impact. Food and ag was the place that I wanted to participate. And you see a lot of this kind of doom and gloom narrative. Not all true as well. There is enough food. We will be able to feed everybody. We're not only 40 harvests away from the end of the world. But I mean, it is a scary problem set, and whether or not it's super accurate, it is definitely happening. So then how do you build a venture strategy relative to this problem set? And so what you might do from a basic perspective is say, I'm going to identify what the outliers could be, the disruptive potential companies to solve for this problem set, and there should be value there. And clearly it generated a lot of ideas in people and in investors, but it really is not refined enough to help you understand where you should put dollars that you want invested into regenerative agriculture or other parts of the food system, because it allows you to explore too much space. And we really saw that happening, although great consumer sentiment in the beginning and investor sentiment, but alternative products was one of those big categories, and we saw what happened there. Came out bursting through the market, but has really not performed over the long term. And you say, okay, I'm trying to solve for the food system. I'm not sure we're ready for this particular type of product. The kind of energy consumption generation / economic demand curves just don't work. So what else can we start thinking about of where value is coming from? So we took a step back and said, okay, we definitely want to participate in the production of food. But even then, we still had a really difficult time figuring out where exactly to participate. So this kind of grounded the strategy, and we're data driven first. As investors, we want to be investing in primary data, in primary production, so we can start better understanding the actual system and what it's delivering. And as you get deeper into the value that regen ag provides, you can look at the nature problem set, not just the food problem set. Say actually natural resources are becoming scarcer. I mean, we use nature as if it's an external resource that's infinite. It's becoming scarcer. A large part of GDP is reliant on it, and we don't account for it properly. This is going to have to happen. Like with any scarce resource, we're going to have to start accounting for it. So if we're investing in the data that's helping us understand the value of nature, there is a play here. And that would be a slightly more clever way to think about investing in regenerative agriculture. Can we start, and the food system in general, can we start looking at it from a perspective of who the winners and losers might be in a world that starts accounting for nature? Which is great. And I think still a very strong investment thesis. The trouble with that investment thesis in terms of refinement is it really doesn't give you a timeline. One thing I've definitely seen over the last few years is the pulling back of capital from climate funds, more more climate funds closed in 2024 than did in 2022 and 23 combined. So I think the signal that that kind of gives us is the capital that goes strictly into climate as the reason for solving or as the thing to solve for, that capital is discretionary. And when interest rates are zero and people are quite happy, then yeah, maybe we have time to think about problems that are 50, 100, 200 years away. But as soon as capital became constrained, all of that capital more or less disappeared, which is also not great for startups, not great for the investors who invested on that basis. And we've also seen consumers themselves don't particularly care about this problem. If you look at Google search trends for climate change, it's very low, except for April every year, because that's when Earth Day is. And so people care about it one day, essentially, but not enough for it to be a really driving factor in their daily lives. So you might ask a consumer, would you buy net zero products? Yes. Will they actually buy net zero products? No. So we have seen that climate really hasn't been the answer. But if you take the same graph and overlay nutrition as a search term and trend in popularity, it is much higher and consistent. People care about their health and their nutrition consistently and all the time. And so why we frame regen ag as a solution just for climate is a poor framing, in the sense that we're providing much bigger value to people that they're actually willing to pay for and that they care about on a much frequent basis. And terms like longevity, lifespan, health span are at their greatest popularity that they've ever been. So there's a definite consumer convergence. When we say, like, the time was, Mary mentioned, it was 25 years ago, and she's right, but the time is also now. It is even more so now. The spread of information and the conversation that is happening with the consumer, and there's a lot of reason to start looking at our investment in regen ag this way. So that's what we started to build out, is a view of how to attack and approach a different problem set, or an additional problem set, around human health span, which lags a decade behind our lifespan. Chronic disease, I mean, Mary had a bunch of great metrics, but claiming 41 million lives each year, and the cost of diet and lifestyle related diseases projected to reach 47 trillion. I mean, there's a lot of cost built into this, which means there's a lot of opportunity. So then the question becomes, how do you build an investment thesis around that? You do all three bits. Identify the right companies with disruptive technologies that have the right customer. I didn't talk about this too much, but having the right customer is super important. What I find awkward, or found awkward, about ag tech VC, and some people still doing it this way, but if you're optimizing only for yield and your customer is the farmer, you are selling to probably the poorest person in the system, and you're commoditizing the asset that your whole VC structure is based on, because nobody's paying more for your product and you're creating more of it. And so having the right customer, disruptive companies, generating data, so you can have that call option on the long-term climate play, but ultimately about delivering human health that really brings the conversation into the near term, and value that you can calculate. And that's what we have been working on in our agri-health strategy, is a strategy that's grounded in tangible value. We're talking about healthcare as an intervention. That's food as medicine, but medicine is also used to treat disease, but you can prevent disease. I think food and ag, particularly agriculture, is the only way to deliver population scale healthcare to the planet. And at the same time, being able to do that while delivering on planetary health, it's resilient to macro shifts. Healthcare is the only industry, even in down cycles, that has not received less investment. It's generally flat or still positive. And there's a massive arbitrage opportunity here. This revaluing and thinking of agricultural companies as healthcare companies is there. That's the opportunity to capture, and we're doing it without measuring in proxies. I think one of the challenges with climate as well, measure things like carbon, because or GHG, and this relates to the change in temperature, the change in climate for the planet, and things getting more disruptive, the planet becoming unhealthy, and then we can't live here anymore. The thing we actually care about in that whole system is being able to live on this planet. So if we are actually measuring agriculture from its ability to deliver human health outcomes, we skip all of the proxies that confuse the system and go straight to the truth. And it's also about passively acquiring high value data. And this could be a whole nother talk about AI and where things are going from a technological perspective. But as we get more and more usage and throughput on compute and cost is coming down, more and more scientific discovery is not going to necessarily come from machines, but very much aided by machines. So then you think about what data sets are we going to start caring about as we can do more and more. It's going to be people and planet related. There are tons of market forces. Just at a high level, consumers are demanding more, which I mentioned. Food corps are facing profit pressure. Healthcare systems are totally in crisis, and we're starting to see some movement from governments, and that's also really interesting. I did hint at the technological changes, but this is also why the time is now. One of the biggest challenges in agriculture as it relates to data was the cost of data acquisition was too high, and the compute time was too long, and analysis time. And so the cost of getting a sample, sending it to a lab and getting it back, you may not even be able to make the appropriate decision because your decision window is closed, but also that was an incredibly expensive process that had to happen with labs. We now see compute moving to the edge, AI moving to the edge, labs moving to the field, and things are changing quite rapidly, and that's very exciting. So we are looking at a world in which we're shifting the view of agriculture from quantity to quality, deliver more nutrition, and deliver a better product to humans. And there's incredible value there if we can measure it. And measurement has always been the challenge, but we think if we can do it, you have this arbitrage opportunity, 3, 5 times, maybe even more, of the value of these agricultural companies. And it just makes perfect sense if you could tell the story this way. And so we've spent our time doing that. I just throwing up the team slide to point out Dr. Amy Godfrey. She was a physician at the NHS, is now leading our research on how we can quantify the healthcare benefits of agricultural innovation at a high level. This is what we're looking at in our AgriHealth formula. How can we quantify the health uplift? There's a lot of research in this space centered around terms like quality adjusted life years or QALY. There's also DALY, which is disability adjusted life years, and also healthcare spend. If you can quantify the value of what is being delivered through an agricultural innovation to how many people, there's already a societal value. It's a willingness to pay. In Europe, it's about 30,000 euros per quality adjusted life year. So it is the way the kind of medical infrastructure values and does kind of apples to pears comparisons to make it apples to apples, so that they can determine which interventions are worth doing. So if we can look at agriculture that way and say, well, in the medical world, an intervention that delivers one quality adjusted life year looks like this, we could similarly deliver that type of intervention or preventative effort. Then this is how much actual healthcare value is left on the table. And it is a real way to start measuring that impact value. So we're doing a lot of research in this space, and working with some great partners as well to extend this research. But it is the way we're looking at now the agricultural world in terms of delivering healthcare outcomes with a number that the markets understand, the healthcare systems understand, and then we can say these companies are doing a lot more than sending you some calories or some slightly more improved yield. And I love this comment from Amy, which I will more or less end on, is that if this kind of intervention could be delivered through medicine, we would be ethically bound to prescribe it. And it's unbelievable that we have a food system that can deliver so much from a healthcare perspective, and that just isn't valued that way. So that's what we're working on. We believe that trend is coming, and we believe we need better ways to describe it. So I think, Mary's totally right. Like, what if we could get together food is medicine, regenerative agriculture in general, and build that into the food system? We would be saving a lot of money and also making a lot of money. So I'll end there, and then maybe we can get to some questions.
Love it. Thank you, Naeem. I so love where this work is going, and thank you guys for putting so much work on that whole journey to get here. It's very exciting. I want to ask you a few follow-up questions, and then for those of you in the audience, I have a couple questions gathered, but keep adding them to the Q&A section, please, and I'll get to those soon. Okay, from the perspective of the agri-health framework that you just described, what are the greatest needs in the system or obstacles that you are trying to unlock with your solution or your approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and it's obviously very nascent in terms of the timing of working on this thing. It's ultimately what we would like to do is connect soil health to plant health to animal health to human health, and it's a very difficult path to measure, and work has to be done at several parts of that chain. We're very much focused on the early part, soil to plant and soil to animal, so essentially up to the farm gate, making sure that things that are produced and the way we produce them are either increased in nutrition or reduced in toxicity. But there is a lot of work for a lot of other people to do in the rest of that path. And so I think the challenge is going to be getting all of the collaboration together, getting the data together so that we can actually draw that line. And we are drawing it or we're drawing points in a lot of different places. I think there are a lot of people doing really incredible work in the rest of the system. And so I think it's going to be a challenge about getting that together, because once the case is clear, I think this whole thing flips. And we go from agriculture being a detriment to maybe human health and planet health to being the thing that actually helps us survive here and live healthier lives on the planet.
Love that. And there's a lot of work to do. And thank you for embarking on this. I think some of the questions we have in the chat, and one of the questions I had for you kind of tie together, which is, can you give us some examples of some of the types of companies that you might invest in through this framework? And Susanna wanted to know in particular, any companies in Europe that you might be investing in.
Yeah, sure. I saw a message pop up in chat during Mary's, like, why isn't this information just like so readily available or prevalent? And I think that's part of the problem. Not enough people have worked on it, but also you have to find the incentive, and that's challenging. We have an investment in the U.S. in a company called Audacious that is doing nutritional quality and density measurement. We think there's just a lack of baselining. We don't know what we're eating. When the variance of the back of package label is like plus or minus 40%, you actually have no clue what's which carrot you got. But it's like, the metric you've been delivered is the average. So I think that's one type of company we need to be able to measure what is happening, and that's why we're so focused on measurement. But another type of company that I'll mention is one we just led around on, called Antler Bio. Um, Antler Bio is an epigenetics company. They measure the blood of cows looking for stressors in their blood. And what that does is it tells you what interventions you can do to reduce stress. It sounds like animal welfare, and it is. But it turns out that a happy cow not only produces more milk, but produces more nutritious milk. So if you think about that as a pathway, if you could have an intervention on a consistent basis to a massive industry like dairy to deliver increased protein, better omega-3 ratios, et cetera, to a population who are consuming milk from those farmers, then you are delivering healthcare to the wider population. And that's one of the places where we've started doing a lot more work in terms of measuring what are all the nutrients delivered through milk, as an example. If you had deficiencies in those nutrients, what would the healthcare system provide? What is the cost of that delivery, and how much cheaper could I deliver it? And it is on the order of like 100 to 1,000x cheaper to deliver nutrition through something like this. So those are examples of ways we look at. And I can throw one more out, which is like an interesting one because it comes from ag, but then delivers on toxicity. And that's a company that does mycorrhizal fungi pellets for the forestry industry. And these pellets help trees grow faster, reduce morbidity, essentially reestablish the fungal network in forestry, because when you cut down a tree, you lose that network. But it also turns out that fungi has a lot of incredible properties. And so as we gather all the different strains that are being sampled from these forests, we're also seeing other functional properties of fungi that can be delivered to human outcomes. And one of them is there are certain classes and strains of fungi that eat pollution, essentially. You can put it in a waterway, it eats phosphates and nitrates, and this is a very expensive problem that water companies have to solve in terms of toxicity. And in some cases, they don't solve it and just re-release it back into the environment because it's too much effort to clean, and that water is making it to the water supply, but it still lives in our environment. So an interesting kind of nature-based solution around being able to remove pollution from water and reduce toxicity for consumption for humans, we think is really interesting play. And of course, the first antibiotics came from fungi as well. So there's a kind of long-term downstream play in terms of that library being valuable in a pharmaceutical context.
That's incredible. And I know we talked about that in our prep call and it blew my mind away. Thanks for saying it again. People might need to watch the recording because that tie-in is very interesting, but complex, like a lot of this stuff is. And I'm gonna throw a pitch in here for the pitch here. The breadth of companies that can fit within this agri-health framework or that are serving this concept of creating solutions at this intersection of agriculture, food, and human health are pretty broad. And so thanks for sharing a couple of those. And if you are one of those companies or know one of those companies, please apply to the pitch session that Naeem and his team are hosting at the RFSI Forum. Okay, I have some logistical questions too about what you all are doing at TFT. One is, are you collaborating with investors and researchers in analogs industry with respect to undervalued potential for avoided costs, amplified benefits through product reconfiguration? Is that something you guys have done, thought about yet?
Yeah, a mouthful, but I think the I think the answer is yes. And pharma being one of the obvious ones. So I think Novo came up earlier, but we are in touch with other VCs and the pharmaceutical companies themselves. One from the perspective of like this fungi database. Is this interesting to you? What does it have to look like? How do we get biotech values out of this agricultural company? And working on the research there. What does the database have to look like, and what kind of functional properties are you looking for, et cetera, et cetera. So there is that part of the scope. I think there's also on the food brand side interesting conversations that we are having and continue to have around. It doesn't look great for a lot of food brands right now, in terms of market price, demand, where things are going, what consumers are looking for. But a view on your sick care product that was delivering calories before could now be a healthcare product. The price of a highly nutritious protein bar, and what that looks like, and it costs way more than a Snickers. But if your Snickers had that kind of nutritional value, would you be considered a nutrition company? A different kind of view. And I think there are definitely some market leaders in the space now starting to think about, we would like to make and create food that we would like to eat, and what does that look like, and what does that mean for our market potential? So yeah, I mean, I think we are doing some of that, but it's on everybody to do that really in our ecosystem. And that's why we kind of want to talk about agri-health as a strategy, but also a category. And you mentioned Susanna, who's also very much on that agri-health thing, and Harvest Care is incredible. But it really needs a lot of people working and speaking the same language. And I think that's Regen has always had difficulty with that, in terms of, we all say regen, but then every person you ask about its meaning has a different way to look at it. So I think it's about getting grounded in the way we talk about things. So increasing collaboration, but speaking the same language is going to be critically important.
Yeah, and remains an obstacle. I'm curious about the comment you made about the brands and they're kind of shifting their positioning or becoming a health brand, because Kyle in the questions asks, he is a small family brand. How do we convince retailers of the value of regenerative organic / nutrient density? They're still in the paradigm of cheap food and national year-round supply, and little interest in paying for practices at the regional level. It's interesting because what I kind of heard from this, and maybe I heard it wrong, was maybe we're not asking to be paying for pay for practices, but for nutritional outcomes or nutritional density within food. What are your thoughts on Kyle's comment there?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head there. It's when you ask any large organization to pay for anything, then you're already on the defensive. But part of it, I think, is the consumer shift. We've seen food become commoditized over the last 70 to 80 years, and that was by choice. I mean, we optimized for availability and cost. Food is supposed to deliver nutritious calories. We solve for one part of that by just delivering calories and less nutrition. but it really reduced the price. But we are paying for it elsewhere, as Mary mentioned. So I think part of it is bringing the data to light, hard on the small brand side to be doing that, but to be part of the process for sure in terms of having your stuff measured. Can we create, I mean, as in my job, can I create a low cost way for you to measure the nutrition that you're delivering? And then is that a metric that people want to buy for? That data doesn't really move throughout the supply chain right now. It's a big challenge. It all gets aggregated at one place and then it's passed as a commodity. And it's just how much do you have? How much do I need to buy? What's the price and when can I get it? That's how procurement works. We think there needs to be systems in the supply chain that move data. So that's another thing about investing in data. Data for data's sake that sits in one place is not useful. It has to move. We made an investment, relative to that in terms of a data transport layer to help supply chain being able to choose from more options. So multiple things need to happen systemically. I think just getting them on the same page though around if you could procure around this metric, would you? And then if I could show you that metric, then put the orders in. And it's a conversation. I mean, there's a lot of friction from retailers. Of course, they don't want to change the price of something they've trained their customer base on. And Apple costs this much, and it shouldn't cost that much more. And governments don't want that either because people are going to start yelling and screaming when the price of food goes up, as we've seen. So I think there's a lot of things converging. I think it is really difficult. Supply chains are not really built for small farms as well, for small holders, but there's some technologies and innovation that's coming to that space. I think we will get there soon. I could talk a lot about how I think the AI and agentic universe is actually going to support this quite a bit, but I won't get into that until later, or maybe a separate conversation.
Absolutely. Man, there is so much complexity in all of this space, but especially in this kind of nexus that we've been talking about today. Thank you for bringing so much and sharing so much. We could probably talk for another half hour, all day, but we are out of time. So I just want to say thank you, Naeem. Do you have any final comments you want to share with anybody? And I'll throw out there, Naeem and his team will be at the forum in Minneapolis to engage further in this conversation. And of course, again, if you would like to pitch, you should. They provide custom comments to your pitches if you get to be a pitcher at our event. But do you want to close this out with any final comments, Naeem?
I mean, nothing super strong other than to say, I mean, let's collaborate. Let's figure out how to work together. It's going to take a lot of us to move in this direction. But as we do, I think there's tremendous value to be gained. From an impact perspective, human and planet, but also from an investment perspective, this could be one of the biggest spaces to open up potentially in our lifetime. So don't get scared. Collaborate and stick with it. I think we'll all do quite well in the long run.
I love it. This is so exciting. You guys are on an awesome track, and thank you for your work. This brings us to the end of our program. We hope that you all out there enjoyed the range of content that we shared here, and that it offered you a window into the opportunity to build and invest in the intersection between agriculture, food, and human health. We want to say another great big thank you to Naeem and Mary, and wish you all a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. We hope to see many of you guys in Minneapolis. And again, if you have any questions about Minneapolis, about the pitch session, please do reach out to our team. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the coming days, and you can watch it on over and over again to learn from these folks. Thank you, Naeem, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for the session.